The following is a conversation with John Salka. John began his career in politics in 2001, having spent time on the Brookfield Central School Board, Brookfield Town Supervisor, and County Board of Supervisors. He chaired a number of key committees, including Planning and Economic Development, Mental Health, Social Services, Public Health, and served as Vice President of Board of Health for 6 years. John oversaw $40 million of taxpayer money, and his crowning achievement during his tenure was privatizing the Public Health Nursing Agency, thus saving taxpayers over $1 million in the first year of its divestiture. He also chaired the Energy Committee and was president of the Madison County Public Utilities Corp. In 2018, John was elected to the New York State Assembly, representing the 121st District, which encompassed all of Madison, the southern part of Oneida, and most of Otsego counties. He served for 2 terms, and due to unconstitutional redistricting, he decided not to run for the 3rd and final term. John is currently the Director of Community Affairs for Congressman Brandon Williams of the 22nd Congressional District that encompasses all of Onondaga, Madison, and Oneida counties. I have followed John for some time and believes he wants the best for upstate New York. His public service contribution is one I respect. He has been in the government role 23 years and has witnessed many trends in political discourse, which is why I am excited to talk with him today. You are listening to the Co-Movement Gym podcast, where we inspire people to move and live courageously. If you are enjoying this content, please support our sponsors in the description. I thank each and every one of you for being on this journey with us. Now, please enjoy the show. Folks, listen up. I want to take a brief moment and thank our podcast show sponsors, Lombardi Chiropractic, Native Path Supplements, and Redmond Life. Lombardi Chiropractic has been my personal chiropractor for 10 years and has kept my body strong and healthy. Native Path Supplements are used by numerous co-movement clients and our coaching team here at the facility. I highly recommend that you try their chocolate collagen peptides. I was made aware of Redmond Life by one of our trainers here at the facility. He recommended I try Relight Electrolyte Powder. This supplement has dramatically improved my afternoon energy levels and overall hydration. I'd like to thank these 3 companies for providing outstanding service and products that make our society healthier and more resilient. Mention the Co-Movement Gym podcast when you call Lombardi Chiropractic, and not only will they treat you like family, they will provide a nice, enticing discount to all listeners. And use code COMO15, that's C-O-M-O 15, at checkout when shopping at nativepath.com or redmond.life and receive 15% off all your orders. Your support to our show sponsors assists in us paying for expenses and continuing to provide content we hope you all enjoy. All right, John, welcome to the Co-Movement Gym podcast. How you doing?
Great. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time. We get to meet in person, so this is nice.
Yeah, much better.
I'm really interested in talking today, starting this conversation, about the small towns like Waterville, Brookfield, Madison, Oriskany Falls. A lot of these towns are struggling, financially. They're not keeping the population. What do you think it's going to take to make these small towns thrive?
Well, upstate New York has always been problematic for a long time now. When the Northeast and a lot of the industries moved out of the Northeast to go either overseas or down to Mexico, a lot of those people that worked in those factories and business establishments were from rural areas like Brookfield, for instance. In Brookfield, a major employer at one time used to be a company down in New York Mills, Hubbell. Mm-hmm. All right, if you talk to somebody in Brookfield, they worked at Hubbell. Mm-hmm. And Hubbell's cut back quite a bit, so consequently, their employment ranks have dropped, and so you don't see that quite as frequently. You don't hear that quite as frequently in a town like Brookfield. But the common denominator is, of course, New York State. And New York State is a very, very heavily regulated state. Mm-hmm. It's a very, very heavily taxed state. And, we see now with the cost of power going up, and who knows what end is in sight with that, with the new Green Deal, which we know is going to increase costs for electricity. And just, the overall environment unfortunately, the sad part about it is it's a really beautiful area.
We love it.
We love Brookfield,
Yeah.
the hills of Brookfield. You couldn't ask for more, just a more beautiful place to be. But, one of the common denominators in the cities when they started to take it a kind of bit of a nosedive was when shopping malls started being built. A lot of the downtown areas ended up being practically abandoned. But like I said, one of the common denominators is New York State. New York State really has to make it more business friendly so that those businesses can come in and they can employ people, and our rural areas can have good, solid taxpayers that want to stay. Unfortunately, New York ranks 49th in the country for business friendly.
Oh, wow.
So we are, New York and California are about the least business friendly states in the whole country. Yeah. And obviously that's going to have an effect because downstate, they don't have a problem because they've got the workforce down there. They have access to a lot of, shipping lanes and so forth and so on. Whereas upstate New York has struggled for a long time to be able to retain people because of the environmental atmosphere.
You think it gets overshadowed by the city?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I can tell from my experience, not only in the New York State Assembly, but as a county supervisor and a town supervisor, we know when we see some kind of proposal come up on the floor of the state legislature that it's going to be New York City that's going to be preferred for funding, for business development, for electricity. It's a huge metropolitan area that takes a lot of resources. Yeah. One of the things that I was working on when I was chairman of the planning committee for the county is we were trying to develop, and I think it's still a work in progress, is a more solid pipeline for goods to come from upstate, especially agricultural goods, to go from upstate New York and make it reasonable to get those products down into the metropolitan area where there's a huge market. We've made some progress on it, but of course we still got a long way to go. And that would help rural areas.
Yeah, and the taxes, the property taxes, right? If you're looking at a small business with small margins, but they're having to pay $10,000, $15,000 a year in property taxes, whether it's for their, home with an in-home business or commercial building, that's a huge dent in their margins when they can go down south and pay a few hundred to a few thousand.
Yeah, exactly. And, I ran a business for 8 years, and, we were ready to expand with a whole nother crew because we did chimney restoration work and cleaning and liners. And we were ready to expand to another crew. The business was out there, but when I looked at the regulatory environment, it was being proposed that we keep track of how much soot we take out of chimneys because they wanted to classify it as toxic waste. Those are the kind of things that cost a business, really real dollars and cents. And we unfortunately, we decided to not do it, because of all the rules and regulations, workman's comp, unemployment. And for instance, workman's comp is been pretty much out of control in New York State. And when you look at other states, they're dropping their comp rates. Yes. My compensation rate when I finally folded up the business was 44%. So for every dollar I pay my employee, I would have to pay 44 cents just in workman's comp alone. Not to mention the 4 kinds of unemployment tax. Yeah. And again, OSHA, because we had scaffolding. Of course, that's a federal program. But time and time again, you would have these rules and regulations and these taxes just stacking on each other to the point where you say, I'm working X amount of hours harder and I'm now making the same amount of money or even less. So, and I've seen that time and time again in New York State. When I was the assemblyman, I heard a lot from local businesses. Not only now are they having a tough time finding help, but every time you turn around, New York State's hitting them with another tax. Small point to reinforce that, during the pandemic, New York State paid out huge amounts in unemployment. Yeah. Had to go to the federal government and borrow $13 billion, I believe it was. Well, now the federal government wants it back with interest.
Really?
So in their infinite wisdom, what the state is doing now to small businesses is they're saying, well, we're going to start charging you more in unemployment because we got to pay the interest back at least. Wait a minute. It wasn't my fault you were handing a check to every Tom, Dick, and Harry. And businesses are saying that, and it's costing them more. So that, in that respect, is a classic example of why New York has a tough time keeping businesses and why why there's a huge outmigration of people, over almost 2 million people in the past 10 years. That's amazing.
Yeah, and with that, like you said, they're taking the jobs, and without jobs, there's no employment. And why would families stay,
Exactly. And these aren't, a lot of times, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I'm sure there are numbers, that a lot of times these aren't just people that are, of lower income. We're losing professionals.
Oh, yeah.
I spent years in the medical profession.
Yep.
And in fact, I was just talking to a nurse friend of mine last night, and she said, it's horrible now. They can't find nurses. They can't find doctors, therapists. They can't find phlebotomists because they've either moved out or just simply aren't going into the profession. So,
well, when you look at the job openings for some of these hospitals, like upstate in Syracuse and, locally, the list is like absurd.
It is.
How long it is.
And again, I was a respiratory therapist for 32 years, fully licensed. And I could walk into a hospital tomorrow. In fact, the congressman and I did a tour of the new Mohawk Valley Health Systems Hospital.
Yeah.
It must have been 3 or 4 times where the director said, you want a job? You want some per diem hours?
Oh, really?
Come on, we'll hire you tomorrow. Of course, I'm busy enough with the congressman.
Sure.
But we have a brain drain in New York State. And we need to slow it down. We need to keep our young people here. A lot of them are graduating from colleges, and they're just moving on because they just don't see any opportunity here.
And when those young graduates move, a lot of times their parents are getting close to retirement, and then they follow the kid. This is something I've noticed just in the last 10 years working with clients at our business. The kid will get out 21, 22. They get their first job in Florida. Mom and dad are 3-4 years from retirement. Then they go to Florida. And they're gone. So not only do you lose the kid, but you lose the parents.
In another industry, and I follow this very, very closely because I represented a lot of the area that I represented over the years, being a small town and the assembly, and now, of course, working out of the congressional office, is our farmers. I mean, our farmers are really taking it on the jaw. And then New York goes ahead and passes an onerous farm bill that ends up costing farmers much, much more to keep their help. So what's happening is...
can you talk about that farm bill? Because that is something I want to get into today. I'm a huge advocate for the small farmer. It's so sad seeing Central New York's dairy farmers go out.
Yeah.
They're almost all crop farmers, or they're out of business, or they've sold to a larger farm. Can you speak to some of the regulations and like the farm bill and different things as to how they got squeezed out?
Well, the big component of the farm bill was what they're paying for overtime. All right. In the past, the farmers pretty much, if they had a lot of hours, that they had their people out in the fields and doing repair work and milking cows and all that, they were able to give as many hours as was needed. And in agriculture, that can be a lot of hours. The old saying, you got to make hay while the sun shines. Well, you know what? If the sun is shining on a Sunday, you're out there making hay. Well, one of the components of the farm bill is you got to give those people a day off. Most likely it's a Sunday. All right. But what was really damaging was that now farmers have to pay overtime on any of their help that works over 60 hours. And in the bill now is written that now over time it's going to be dropped down to 40 hours. So anything over 40 hours. And many farmers are just saying, we can't do it. And here's the kind of ironic part about it is I got talking with a lot of people who come up from Mexico or Nicaragua or El Salvador to work and to send money home.
Yeah.
Now they're being told by the farmers, I can't give you those hours anymore because I can't afford the overtime. Now the state said, well, we're going to compensate you for that overtime. But it's a cash flow issue.
Sure.
You might have to wait 6 months or more to get that money back from the state, but you've got to make that payroll tomorrow.
Yep, and that state that's compensating them, it's still taxpayer money.
Exactly.
You're like, we're not printing money out of thin air here.
And that's the thing about, just a side note, the thing about this downtown revitalization money and all that, that money doesn't come from some black hole, okay? That money comes from the New York State taxpayers. And a lot of times, and I've been criticized for having this position, but a lot of times those downtown revitalization incentive monies are purely political.
I say that all the time, especially from the economic standpoint. This isn't free money. It's coming.
There's no such thing.
There's no such thing. So,
I mean, this is kind of the heartbreaking type of meetings I have to have. About three weeks ago or a month ago, I was invited to sit down with a group of farmers. Gentleman farms just outside of Waterville, just south of Waterville. He's 78 years old. His son doesn't want to carry on the business.
Yep.
Okay, I can see why.
It's very common. Most of them don't want to.
There's succession plans,
Yep.
and the average age for a farmer right now, I think, is 57.
Yeah, it's closer
Something
to
like,
60,
close
I
to
think.
60, yeah, probably. So, I'm sitting there at the table with these 5 farmers. One's an organic farmer, but the gentleman who owned the farm where we were having the meeting at, 78 years old, mostly deaf, all right, probably from equipment and all that.
Yep.
And he's out there in the morning because I pass by his farm.
Okay.
And in the morning, and he's out there all hours of the day and night, spreading manure, milking cows, chopping corn,
losing money every week.
And I got a letter from his wife.
Okay.
Last week. And she sent it with an article about so much is going on with farming, about survivability. She said, we don't think we can survive past this year. Heartbreaking. Because why would you work so hard
for nothing?
Only to be told or only to come to the realization that it's just not going to cut it.
Yep.
And it's an interesting thing because, everybody wants to go big.
Yep.
But the big problem with going big is if you lose a 3,000 head dairy farm, it has much more of an impact, all right? Whereas if you got 100 or 30 small farms that are milking 100 or 200, all right, 1 or 2 go under, you can absorb that break in the chain of
100%.
supply, right? So that's another thing. Is years ago, Cornell Cooperative Extension encouraged everybody get big, get big, get big.
Yep, they still are. Those are the ones surviving, but we're see for how much longer.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly, because they're basically they have higher overhead. They have to have a market. Big issue right now is the milk market.
Yep.
I know farmers that have called me on the phone extremely upset saying, I just got a call, I lost my market. I got to dump my milk.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that gets into the complicated, should we have quotas? Should we have price controls and so forth and so on? But, the old, it's kind of a joke, but farmers joke about it, that the price of milk in New York State is judged by the price of cheese in Wisconsin. It's an extremely difficult, extremely complicated milk formula.
Yes.
All right. It's almost like the school aid formula.
Yes.
All right. Extremely complicated. So most farmers sort of understand it.
Yep.
But I've talked to a lot of people that have no clue that have been in the dairy industry for a long time.
Yep.
So our farmers are under the gun. And the old saying, and people got it on their bumper stickers, no farms, no food.
Yeah, I have it on mine.
Yeah. So there you go. It's true.
Yeah.
When our farms go under, we have lost a dependable supply of relatively inexpensive, cheaper goods that we know are clean.
Yep.
We know the source. We know that they're not coming from Mexico, and who knows what they're putting on those products down there. So, as a matter of fact, the congressman that I work with, we held our first Ag Advisory Council meeting at SUNY Morrisville.
Okay.
About a month and a half, 2 months ago. Went over very well. The Farm Bill, which is a massive, massive piece of legislation that's coming before Congress, will probably be debated soon. And unfortunately, 80% of the Farm Bill goes to the SNAP program, goes to food stamps.
No way.
80%.
See, who would know that?
Yeah. See,
right?
One of the most challenging jobs I had, I've noticed right from the time I was on the school board in Brookfield to the time now I'm sitting as the director of community relations for the congressman, is that once people understand what's going on, they really start to wonder what's going on. Okay.
Whose best interest is this really in?
Exactly.
I ask that question all the time. And some people will say, it's conspiracy theory or this or that. I don't think you have to have a really high IQ that once you start understanding some fundamental principles, who is it benefiting?
Exactly. And that's probably one of my biggest challenges, one of my biggest frustrations as I've been in public life is that, like, for instance, the budget, the New York State budget. When I first got elected back in 2018, it was $172 billion.
Okay.
This year, it's $227 billion. So in a matter of 5 years, it's gone up over 30%.
That's one state.
It's one state.
Yeah.
One state. And so, it's a huge component of that is Medicaid. New York offers what they call Cadillac Medicaid, the best in the country. We spend more than the next 5 states down combined. So it's insane.
But are we healthier?
No, we're not.
So, right? And this goes with the public school system, similar stat. We're spending one of the highest amounts per student, right, in the country for their public school education, but we're not the smartest.
And here's the thing.
So how can we justify that expenditure without getting the results. It's like someone paying me at the gym, right? They're paying. They don't see any results.
How long are they going to stay at your gym?
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, this is capitalism 101.
Correct.
And just to get back around to the farm bill is I felt, because I'm from an agricultural district, that I should be part of the debate. Mm-hmm. So we were on the floor of the assembly, and I'm debating the prime sponsor of the bill. And her name was Catherine Nolan. She's from downstate, down in Queens. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many farms they go by when they're going to work in Queens. I know I go by at least a half a dozen on my way to work. So I said to her, I'm from an agricultural district. I don't want to snag you or anything like that. But we're talking costs. We're talking overhead and all that. Mm-hmm. Do you have any idea what a farmer gets for 100 pounds of milk? Because it's sold by the 100-pound weight. Mm-hmm. And I said, it's a very generic question because a lot of it depends on butterfat content and all that.
Sure.
All right. And I like to keep track of that.
Yep.
And at the time, it was, and I said, do you know how much? And she said, kind of in a condescending way, she said, no, I don't. And I said, oh, well, it's about $17 a hundred. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I said, do you have any idea what it cost them to produce that 100 pounds of milk? Okay. And at the time, it was a little over $20. So he said, so simple math, they're already working at a loss.
Yep.
And you're asking them now to pay overtime.
Yep.
All right. And to comply with all these other regulations, what do you think they're going to do? And she just looked at me. She shrugged her shoulders and she said, they'll figure it out.
Yeah. You won't. It's basic math.
Sorry.
It's 8th grade math.
All due respect, man, they won't.
Yes.
They can't.
Well, they aren't. That's why they're selling.
Exactly.
Right? And the kids don't want to be a part of it.
No.
That stat you just gave is actually almost directly in line with what I researched. Right now, I think it costs $1.92 a gallon for farmers to produce that. Mm-hmm. They're getting paid on average $1.32.
So how can anybody run a business like that?
Can't.
Or how can anybody? And this is why I respect them so much. Is they get up in the morning, they put their boots on, they go out to the barn,
every day, 7 days a week.
7 days a week, rain or shine,
yep.
or snow, blizzard, or whatever. All right, to work at a loss.
Yeah.
So anybody really coming off the street would say, "Well, I don't want to bother doing that."
Yes.
Well, what happens when they say the same thing?
Correct, and it's soon. Like within, I think they said the next 5 to 10 years, 90% of the small farms are going to have a turnover. And who's going to acquire that land? The big farms
or solar businesses,
that hedge funds, right?
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. It's when people are going to start to care about this issue is when they realize the food system is globalized. And just what you said earlier, our food's coming from Mexico, right? Costa Rica, like places we don't know what they're doing to it. The import costs are so high. People are going to start caring when they can't go to a farmer's market because there is no farms producing food for the farmers market. Then they're going to get concerned. But by then it's way too late.
And that's going to be the shock value, I think, is going to be able to change people's minds. But again, I agree, it might be too late. Let's say, for instance, hypothetically, you go to the grocery store, you want to buy a gallon of milk and a dozen eggs, and it ain't there.
Correct.
Okay, and we already know what a fragile supply we have right now with the food chain.
COVID, the eggs,
exactly.
All that. Yeah,
exactly. So, when these people who live in the inner cities or wherever start going to their grocery store and realizing more and more of the goods that they had, and in a way we were our own worst enemy, but because it's such a great country, we've always been able to supply ourselves and a good portion of the world with good products.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And no matter what it cost, it was always not inconsequential, but it was a factor, but we were always able to deliver. My concern is I'm not sure how much longer we can do that. I remember when I first took office as a town supervisor in Brookfield, I think we were already losing farms by the troves, but there were quite a few farms still in the town of Brookfield. I think we have 4 left.
Yeah.
And there's one's a beefer, one raises beef.
Yep.
Okay, over on Route 8.
Yep.
Wonderful people.
Yep.
And I think 3 or 4 left after that are still milking cows.
Not many, though, not many. Cows. Yeah. Yeah.
No,
small.
Not many at all.
Yeah. We can only hope that this gets figured out. You know? Do you think that, I think about this, it's part of a plan that it's going according to plan as far as not giving local communities access to local food and the sort of their own control around the food system?
Oh, absolutely.
Right, you control the food, control the people. I know that might go down a rabbit hole people don't want to hear, but it's like you see this in other countries like India, all over the place. Russia, They dealt with that in the 30s. It's a huge piece, right? So like when Smithfield Pork down in North Carolina produces 90% of the pork, but then China swooped in and bought them in 2013.
Right.
Like, these are all concerns, right?
But no one seems to be noticing. The politicians don't seem to notice, or
Yeah.
if they do notice, all right, they don't do anything about it, which is even worse.
Yep.
You know, and so and that's why I appreciate what you're doing here. Is I think as long as we start to raise the level of awareness, and that's a tough call.
Yeah.
Because most people, I have to admit, after about 5 or 10 minutes, their eyes glaze over,
I know.
and they want to go about their lives.
I know.
And that's fine. But the point we try to make is, at one point or another, that's going to become more and more difficult.
Yeah.
When you're pumping $5 a gallon gas and you're buying $6 a dozen eggs,
Yep.
all right, then it's going to hit home. And unfortunately, you're going to have to change that attitude that, well, I don't pay any attention because there's nothing I can do about it, to holy cow, what happened?
Yeah.
And I think that people are starting to wake up to that.
Yeah.
I think it's the job of people like me to make sure that they do know, because I do have a unique or a great opportunity to be able to be on the front line with information and being able to present what the problems are. Of course, you have to be very careful about how you present them, because,
Sure.
again, I don't want to say you have to spoon feed people information,
Yep.
but you have to spoon feed people information.
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's the way it is.
Sure.
And
They can only handle so much input.
and they're not. It's not because they're not intelligent.
Yeah.
But there's a capacity.
Yes.
There's a capacity here. I work in this environment.
Sure.
So it's my job.
Yes.
All right. But most people who are employed or doing something else, taking care of their families, enjoy life a little bit, they don't have the capacity for it. So we kind of pick our battles, present it accordingly, and make sure that we can deliver quick information. I know that when I campaign, I've been in 12 campaigns already.
Okay.
I've won 9 of them.
Okay.
So I have knocked on thousands and thousands of doors.
Literally.
Yeah. I love doing it.
Okay.
Right? But I know that you go in there, you knock on that door, you have a palm card, you present who you are, you hand them the palm card, you give them a 30-second delivery, and you're on your way, unless they have questions. Because, number one, a politician knocking at their door is not what somebody's favorite thing to do is.
Sure.
All right? But at least you can say who I am, what I stand for, here's how to get a hold of me if you ever need to talk, and you move on. The point being is that if you get into a long dialogue, a long dissertation, about these things, people, again, they lose interest.
Yeah.
But also in the same respect, you can't water the point down.
Yeah.
That, look, this country's in trouble.
We're going to get into that next.
Yeah, we're in trouble. Okay, and if in fact we don't raise that awareness, if in fact we don't get that involvement that we need.
Yep. And I'm getting more and more interested in these conversations.
Sure. Because
of what you just said, right? Like, we've kicked the can down the road sort of long enough, and now this dividing line is in front of us. So the path that we choose could dictate the next long time, right? And conversations like this, I'm hoping more people gravitate to, and start to want to create changes, at least in their own local community.
And that's where it all starts. And I tell you something from experience. I started out on the Brookfield School Board.
Yep.
I was on that board for 7 years. I was the president for 5. Then I really, got stupid and ran for town supervisor. Okay, got elected. And with Madison County, if you're a town supervisor, you also sit on the county board of supervisors. And my first year, I chaired 4 major committees. All right, something a freshman had never done before, or not in a long time. And then I had plans. I wanted to move on, eventually run for the assembly. I ran 3 times, beat a 28-year incumbent. And but one of my biggest challenges, as I said, was to get people to listen. If I had a town hall meeting, I had all kinds of things I could talk about funding, about Medicaid, about special ed, about school funding, highway infrastructure and all that. And we'd have maybe 10 people show up.
Oh, I see some of these meeting notes.
Yeah.
No one shows up.
Nobody shows up.
Yeah, or there'd be they're put out like questions for the public or concerns about like bigger topics. No one shows up.
And that kind of apathy, to use an old term, that kind of apathy is almost deadly.
Yeah.
We're not asking for you to, like I said, spend 8 hours a day or even longer, doing what I do.
Sure.
All right. Making sure we're staying on top of the issues, making sure that the congressman knows what's going on in the district. That's probably one of my most important jobs, is to brief the congressman on what's going on in the district. And it's a big district.
Yep.
And so I do it for a living, like I said, and I don't expect anybody to dedicate that much time. But if you just took a chunk, 2 15-minute chunks out of your day, and you don't have to read the newspaper, right? I mean, but just do your research. Just do a little research on what's happening all around you.
Yep.
All right?
Yep.
You probably would be better off.
So one thing I hear from a lot of people that listen to the podcast and members at our gym is they're checked out because they don't think they can make a difference.
Oh, gosh.
And they don't think their voice is being heard at all, right? And so at some point, I think they get fatigued and then they just check out, right? So what do you have to say to that? Like I have empathy for that, for sure.
Oh, I do too.
One voice, one person, hundreds of thousands, millions of people. Like, how do we change that mindset?
Well, here's a good example of how that I don't count really doesn't count, shouldn't count, is I ran for this office 3 times. Okay. The third time, out of 44,000 votes that were cast approximately, I won by 485 votes. Okay, so those people going out and saying, you know what, this guy worked hard for it. I wasn't going to go vote, but I'm going to vote today. Of course, that's up to the person to be able to instill that kind of confidence, that people have in you. But there are elections that have won by 1 vote or lost by 1 vote. And if you look at what this country was built on, this country was built on Christian principles.
Yes.
Okay, fear of God.
Yes.
And involvement from the population. And that's
both are gone.
Exactly.
Yes.
And a lot of that's slipping through our fingers. And I don't think we're too far gone yet. Yep. I hope and pray that we're not. But if people do decide that they don't make a difference, then the difference is going to happen to them.
Yeah.
Okay. And the difference is not all that good.
Agreed.
For what this country can do for folks.
Agreed.
This is a wonderful country. I mean, we have been to use the old saying, a shining beam of light for the world.
Yes.
And if we lose it here, we have nowhere else to go.
You're right.
There aren't any countries that are doing what this country has done for its people.
100%.
And I think if people can just keep that in mind, that especially those with young kids. All right. I want a better world. It's it's instinctive that a parent wants a better world for their child.
Yep.
Okay. That used to be the common belief in this country for years and years.
Yep.
I think if you did a poll, which I'm sure has been done, less and less people are feeling that way.
Well, most couples, young couples I speak to, don't want many kids or any kids.
Right.
Because they're scared of the future, truly. And they don't want to I hear this a lot, they don't want to bring a kid into this world. And that's depressing.
It is, because we need that population just from a basic point of how to sustain a human race or any race.
Yep.
Okay, any species is the propagation, the numbers. Okay, once those numbers start to go out of balance with children born versus death, then you have a population that is kind of dissolving.
In reverse. Elon Musk says that this is the number one issue facing humanity.
It is.
Everyone's talking about global warming and this and that. The number one thing is we're not encouraging people to have larger families. We're not filling in the gaps quick enough.
Yeah, and you read some of these statistics, like by 2050, we're going to be in really, and 2050 is, believe me, I'm 68. I look at how fast the past 68 years have gone. Okay, and that's a heartbeat. It's a heartbeat in the overall scheme of humanity. So those kind of attitudes, they just have to change. And it doesn't take a lot of work to be able to become aware of what's going on.
Sure. Mentioning earlier, you said the country's in bad shape. I would agree. I would think that most people listening to this, no matter what side of the divide you're on, would agree with that.
Oh, absolutely.
Morally, ethically, many different topics. So I want to get into some bigger things here. Some of these came from some listeners. Let's start with financial. They just raised the debt ceiling yesterday again.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're obviously a country that is buried in debt. It's getting worse. Will we be ever able to pay this back? And if not, what are the consequences?
Well, it's going to take generations to pay it back. And the way it's trending, that doesn't seem the way it's going to go. We're just going to continue to spend more and more and more. And of course, even though it's the federal government and they have the opportunity, the luxury, if you will, of printing their own money, at one point, because of now what we're seeing in black and white is inflation. Our money is worth less and less. So at what point does that money become so devalued, all right, that it isn't worth anything? And if you look back in history, for instance, Germany, pre-war Germany, they had wheelbarrows full of money.
It wasn't worth it.
And it wasn't worth anything. It wasn't worth the paper it was written on.
Yes.
Yeah, so and I was deeply disappointed to see that they raised the debt ceiling.
Me too.
I understand, all right, they dug this hole and they're digging it deeper and deeper, and at one point or another, that hole's going to collapse in on itself.
It has to self-correct.
It's got to self-correct.
Or the dollar will collapse.
And
we'll all be millionaires.
Which we're seeing.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of people concerned about this.
Yeah, and it is hitting home because, like, for instance, our food budget. Yep. You know, my wife and I will go to the store, and last year, you know, we have a pretty regular routine of going every 10 days or so. And we noticed, you know, what we used to spend $150 on now is $210
yep.
or $215. You say, well, geez, I didn't buy quite as many meats this time. Of course, that's not important to my wife. She's a vegetarian.
Okay.
You know, but at any rate, you know, we're seeing that. And that's the average person in that respect is going to the grocery store and just saying either I can't buy that anymore or it's costing me that much more, or, you know, at what point or another, are you paying $10 for a dozen eggs?
Sure.
I mean, they're paying $10 for a dozen eggs down in New York City right now.
I know.
You know, so at what point? So I don't see it as a sustainable system. And just to make it a little bit more closer to home, in the assembly, the budget process is a big, long, drawn-out process. They keep you up all night. They give you budget bills you've never seen before that you have to vote on, you know, in a half hour that are $10-20 billion. It's a big game.
That should be illegal.
It's a big game.
Yeah.
It really is. But I asked the head of the chair of finance committee, very powerful position, writes the budget, all right, via what she gets for her marching orders from the leadership. And I asked her in the back, in the coffee room, because a lot of conversations I had in the coffee room, sometimes more constructive conversations than on the floor of the assembly.
Sure.
You know, but that's part of the job. And we're sitting there, and I said, Helen, her name's Helen, I said, how do you see this as sustainable? Okay, because you just can't keep on borrowing, you can't keep on spending.
No. All
right, because now the equation's going to be, you know, one-sided.
Yes.
And she kind of looked and said, well, I said, so what happens to that on the day that equation's off? And she just looked and she goes, well, we'll just go to the taxpayers.
Oh, so the solution to paying off this increased debt and with constant printing is to raise taxes.
Just raise taxes.
Yeah.
And in New York State, raise taxes.
Sure.
And consequently, they'll say, well, we're going to tax the millionaires.
Yeah.
But you know something? Someone doesn't become a millionaire or stay a millionaire by being irresponsible with their money.
I was just going to say that I actually have another podcast later today with a financial expert.
Sure.
And we talk about these topics. Yeah. Joseph Brown, Heresy Financial. And so millionaires and billionaires understand tax law.
That's what they pay accountants to do.
Correct. And so
Right.
the whole joke of the rich are going to pay more, there's a tax law somewhere that someone's studying to help them. And I am a capitalist. And so
Sure.
if the government writes a legal tax law and I follow that and it makes me wealthier, or the millionaires and have at it, right? So the principle of having the rich pay more, that's not going to happen. It's the middle class and the poor.
Middle class.
Yeah,
And it's
middle class mainly.
Yeah. And we see what's happening with the middle class. You know, regardless of what you think about him, you know, Donald Trump made perfect sense when they were slamming him on how much taxes he paid. But he said, wait a minute, I'm just following the law that you passed.
That was a great interview.
Yeah.
Regardless of what you think of him. Right. You could argue to say, oh, he's a con man, he doesn't pay taxes, he's, you know, so wealthy. Then change the tax law.
And change the tax law. And that's done by the same people that are accusing him.
Correct.
You know, of all these, you know, doing these terrible things financially. He's just following, he has brilliant accountants, all right, that he pays good money to.
Yeah.
And their job is to find these shelters and these hedges and everything like that. So, you know, again, it all comes down to when they come up with these ridiculous ideas, they know it's not going to work.
Sure.
But it's going to get them some votes.
Yep.
Because they can champion, the little people, if you will.
Yep.
And they stay in office. Just like one of the last votes that I took in the assembly was I voted against their raise. Okay.
Sure.
They gave themselves a 34% raise.
I saw this. It was it about 32,000?
They went from 110,000 to 142,000.
Yeah, it's the same article I saw.
And that's on the heels of the raise that they gave themselves back in 2018.
Yes.
For years, since the early 2000s, their base pay was $79,800.
Okay.
In a matter of 5 years, it just about doubled. And okay, all right, I can understand. You work hard, you represent 130,000 people, all right, but you're a businessman. If you have an employee who consistently underperforms, consistently doesn't deliver, consistently doesn't do what your business is all about, you go out and give them a raise?
Double it?
Right. You say,
No.
Here's the door.
Yes.
But 98% of the incumbents in the New York State Legislature get reelected. 98% incumbency rate. So if you go to work every day, and regardless of whether or not you perform, underperform, overperform, you're going to keep your job.
That's,
Where's your motive to do any better?
Mind-blowing to me.
Where's your motivation to say, I better put my nose to the grindstone or I'm going to get canned?
To be result-oriented. Like, show me the results. Oh, I don't have any. And you want a $32,000 raise.
And you got it.
And
and in the middle of all the crazy things going on in New York State, and I was back in the coffee room, and there were a group of people there, and I know they all voted, and I what do I got to lose? I'm not coming back after this. I said, you people should be ashamed of yourself for what you've done to the New York State taxpayers, how you've raped them, okay, how you've misled them.
Hard-earned money being tossed out.
You know where that money's coming from.
Correct. Yes.
And there were actually people that were, here's their big sticking point. In that whole legislation, there was a component of that legislation that said that if, in fact, you get this raise after 2025, 3 years from now, you're not going to be able to earn more than so much per year doing your lawyer or whatever you're doing. That was the issue they had. And now they've got enough time to challenge it in court, and they'll throw it out.
Sure.
So they're going to get this $142,000 a year, plus all the other expenses they get, stipends and all that.
And benefits.
And still be able to make whatever they make on the side.
Yeah.
And it just seems to me like it's abusive. It's abusive to the taxpayers of the state of New York.
100%. We should be voting on that.
Exactly.
I don't care, again, what side you'd come from. You would be crazy to vote for that. I'd say the majority would not.
And that same point was presented to me by an 8-year-old. No kidding.
Sure, I can see it.
I had this group of kids, and I can't remember. One of the adults in the room wanted to know about the raise. So I explained the process. And this little girl raised her hand, 8 years old. She said, "But isn't that something we should decide?"
Yep.
They circumvented the whole process. Of taking it to a vote, and they gave themselves a raise.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, it's almost surreal.
It is. Yeah. It's Moving on ethically, government leaders are allowed to make policy on industries that they directly benefit from as shareholders. We saw this with COVID.
Oh, sure.
Pfizer, Moderna, right? How is this legal? Like, if I'm writing policy, we're in a meeting and I'm in charge and I own 20,000 shares of Pfizer, and I make these vaccine mandates and all of this, and Pfizer stock's going up 4,000%, but I'm sort of pushing that. How is that? How are government leaders able to create and vote on policy that makes them individually wealthier?
There's something that I came up with, a term that I came up with, especially when I got to Albany, and I noticed it in a smaller scale, the county level, the town level, you don't see much of it. You know, most public officials, I know everybody wants to slam politicians and put them on the same level as used car salesmen and all that. But, you know, I have to admit that a large percentage of the elected officials that I have worked with over the years are good, hardworking people that want to do well for their community.
I agree.
Okay, but I came up with a term called institutionalized corruption.
Okay.
They've embedded this corruption, and it is corrupt.
Sure.
Okay, they've embedded it and been allowed to embed it into legislation, into policy that allows them to do that, allows them to get away with it. All right, and again, this is why it's so important that people call out our leaders, asking them for accountability, asking them to prove themselves, not just at election time, but bug them.
Yes.
All right, and I've always been a big proponent of, well, they say again, there's the apathy, it doesn't work. Yes, it does. I was in elected office. If I get 400 emails from something, I'm sure as heck going to listen.
Sure. Okay. Yep.
You know, so it's been allowed to happen because they can get away with it.
Yeah.
They can get. I'll give you a quick example.
Okay.
I was on a committee in the Assembly called the Children and Families Committee.
Okay.
Wonderful committee. And we had, our conference had a piece of legislation, and not to get into the particulars, but it would have helped kids with after-school programs and disabilities. It was a $5 million program, I think, and out of a $220 billion budget, that's peanuts. So the committee chair is looking at it, and of course, in Albany, all the chairs are held by Democrats, by mostly downstate Democrats, which gives them an incredible amount of power.
Sure.
So he's looking at the bill, and he said, "Oh, I like this bill. This seems like it could help a lot of kids." And we thought, well, that's great, Mr. Chairman. Send it to the floor for debate. And he responded, if I ever send a Republican bill to the floor, I'll never hold another chairman's position again. Killed the bill.
Wow. That is not representing the people.
Killed the bill. And at that point in my career, I said, no, I'm not. What am I doing here? What am I doing here?
Sure.
Okay, if we can't even get a bill passed that helps kids with disabilities.
Due to party representation.
Right.
Yeah.
What am I doing? And I think that's what finally made me decide not to run again. That's one of the factors that made me decide that, plus redistricting destroyed my district.
Yes, we talked about that.
You know, and I think those two factors made me realize that, and I'm not being holier than thou or anything like that, but because we've done well throughout the years, but I thought, I'm not going to be earning this taxpayer's check, okay? Because essentially, my colleague there who worked with me, Isaac, who worked with me as my chief of staff for 3 years, he heard it to the point where he was pretty sick of hearing it. But I always used to say, I tell my staff, I don't sign your paycheck. Your paycheck is signed by the taxpayers of the state of New York.
Correct.
You work for them.
Yes.
Okay? You work for them. That's who you're accountable to. That's who we're all accountable to. And I think because of things like the high incumbency rate and the fact that people aren't paying attention, a lot of people, not all, but a lot of people, enough people in political office look at that as an opportunity to get away with just about anything.
Sure.
And that's got to stop.
It does.
We've got to hold these people accountable. There's got to be term limits. I'm a firm believer in term limits.
Me too. 100%.
And we've got to tell these people who the boss is.
This would be similar to if, again, as a coach that produces health results, that I'm guaranteed to just keep getting paid regardless of results. My work ethic and drive to want to get better and create results would be cut in half overnight.
Where's your incentive?
There is none.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know of people several, witnessed it myself, older gentlemen that have been in their 14th term in the assembly, literally asleep on the floor of the assembly.
We've seen videos of YouTube on that.
Literally asleep.
Sure.
Okay? And no one's waking them up.
No.
So, I just am astounded sometimes, that, incumbency has a lot of advantages. And one is that you have access to a lot of resources that a challenger doesn't have, like the mailers, okay? And like, legislative records and things like that, or the conference, contributes to your campaign, so there's a lot of things that give that incumbent's edge to a lot of elected officials. And so they become so entrenched, so comfortable because they know they're not going to get thrown out. Where's the motivation to get anything done?
None.
So inherently, again, the reason why it's so important that we demand accountability. And there's nothing more inspiring, in a lot of respects, sometimes not, it makes things a little uncomfortable, but we have, during the legislative session in Albany, of course, people come to Albany to lobby. And there's a set of elevators that are just for the legislators, okay, that go up to the chambers. And I've gotten off that elevator, and it was a sea of people.
Sure.
I mean, a gauntlet. You had to walk through a gauntlet of people. But how, and there was sometimes they were there pretty much advocating for something I don't believe in.
Sure.
Like, I voted against legalizing marijuana.
Yep.
Okay, that's my ethics. That's what I ran on. Okay, we had to walk through a gauntlet of people advocating to legalize marijuana. But I'm thinking, yes, yeah.
They're here trying to stand for something.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. You're showing who you are and what you stand for. All right? And you're telling us, this is my grievance. That assembly chambers or the outside the chamber should be filled every single day during session.
Yeah.
But it's not.
It's not.
It's not.
Health. Our food pyramid recommendations, the USDA, the FDA has created a population that's predicted to be 70% obese by 2030. We know what this is doing to the healthcare system also. What do you think it's going to take to turn this around? This is another one of those things that the numbers are so far out of whack and headed the other direction. We're seeing this with 5-year-olds, type 2 diabetes, right?
Exactly.
This is the industry I work in directly, and I can say it's getting bad fast. But the government regulations with the food pyramid, right? 12 servings of grains a day, right? High carb. It's not correct. And we're not seeing regulation change. Now they're saying cows are bad because they burp and they have methane and eat less meat, eat crickets.
Yeah, because of cow farts, we're going to have New York City's going to be underwater.
Correct.
In 10 years. But they've been trying to sell that climate religion for a long time.
But the scary thing is people are buying it now.
They are.
The greenies, and again, I'm in a pro-environment, but the far side of that conversation is buying this. But we will be a species that will be extinct. I don't have time frames, but if we don't turn this around, so what kind of role does the government play, if at all, with this?
Well, obviously the government is probably the largest entity financing the healthcare system in this country through Medicaid, Medicare. There are millions and millions of people. And we've known for a long time that how misappropriated those funds are. Instead of treating chronic diseases, why don't we see if we can nip it in the bud? Okay, I still am a certified smoking cessation counselor. I used to run smoking cessation classes at Community Memorial Hospital, and we had a pretty good success rate, as a matter of fact. The average smoker, though, ends up going at least 7 attempts before they finally quit.
Sure.
Okay, so it's labor intensive. There's no doubt about it, but we have gone through the years, and big pharma's got a lot to do with this because they don't make money off healthy people. All right, we've gone through a lot of changes in medicine, and instead of focusing on preventative, instead of focusing on keeping people healthy, all right, we want them to get sick.
Correct.
Because it's more easy to sell a huge prescription like Rybelsus, okay, than it is teaching those people when they're young, this is how you live a healthy lifestyle.
And people think what you just said would be almost like sick, right? Like we want a sick society.
Sick society is big money.
Correct. So we do want that, right? Like no one's going to come out and say that. But these pharmaceutical companies that lobby and create policy, right, intermingling with, policies that are approved, a healthy society, they don't benefit from.
No, and like, for instance, even smaller things, like, for instance, I during my career in medicine, I was the director of the Mid-York Asthma Coalition. Okay, it was a 3-county group, and we had a wonderful program, all right, that would go into the schools. We would go into the schools and we would teach kids how to manage their asthma.
Sure.
How to use their inhalers, how to read their flow meter, when to know they're in trouble. And it was a very, very successful program. And because you still have 5,000 people a year on the average die from asthma. All right. And we had funding through the American Lung Association and through New York State, and they pulled our funding.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. And we were actually, in black and white, we were able to see that we were keeping kids out of emergency rooms.
Sure.
Because they were taught how to manage their disease.
Yep.
Okay, and they pulled the funding. We might have had a $25,000 grant. Yep. And what we did with that, obviously, we squeezed every penny.
Sure.
Did a lot of volunteer work. Hospitals did in-kind services and all that. Schools and school nurses were very cooperative. This was great. They loved the program. And we had to abandon it. Mm-hmm. All right. Mm-hmm. So that $25,000 investment that was made in a year paid off many, many times by keeping a kid out of a very expensive emergency room visit.
Yep.
So even if you kept 25 kids out of emergency room in the 3-county area, okay, you were realizing the return on your investment.
And that is what I feel we need to be. I'm a math guy, right? Numbers. it's truth.
Better you than me.
Right, okay. But if you have the $25,000 grant, but you saved $2 million in whatever, hospital visits, surgery, whatever, that was a great ROI. But if you spend the 25 and you got nothing, right? Then we have to can that.
Exactly.
But in your situation, it worked out very well.
It worked out very well. And there's been some very successful diabetes teaching programs. But now we're teaching them after they've acquired the disease.
Correct. Okay? And we're also stating a lot of narratives around a lot of it's genetic. And it's okay, Johnny, that you are 12. Yeah. You're 12 and you have type 2 diabetes. We have a pill for that. Here's how to manage your insulin versus how much sugar a day are you eating? 400 grams a day. Maybe you should cut that down by 90%, right? We're not having these conversations at all.
No, we're not. And, I saw so many changes in medicine over the 32 years, that is in staffing and the quality of care and the way that medical students are being taught, and what they're being taught. Now they're, spending a good amount of time on diversity, equity, and inclusion, okay, instead of teaching how to recognize and diagnose, a particular ailment. Yeah. Medical schools already have, you're a medical student, you're going literally 24/7 in a lot of respects. I've worked at hospitals, teaching hospitals, and seeing what these residents go through, and I can't even imagine putting more on their plate. Mm-hmm. So if you can only put so much on somebody's plate, are you going to teach them diversity, equity, and inclusion? Or are you going to teach them differential diagnosis? Okay, well, you should be teaching them differential diagnosis.
Should be.
But we're not now. Yep. And again, it's, I hate to be gloom and doom, but, and here's an inherent problem with medicine. In fact, I was talking yesterday with somebody in the healthcare profession about this, is the way our payment system is set up, okay? Most of the time, you have a third-party payer, okay? You've got an insurance company. Yep. So it's just like a credit card. You go to the store and you buy something, and you never actually take money out of your pocket and give them a $5 bill, okay? You go to the doctor and you sign, you pay maybe your copay. Here, bill, I don't know where the bill is. Somebody else paid it. Wow. So where's the motivation to say, geez, maybe I shouldn't really go to the doctors. Maybe I can take care of this at home.
You're right.
And so,
but we're paying it somewhere with increased health premiums, right? We're paying for it.
New York State this year, I think in the budget, I haven't had the chance to look at the 2023-24 budget, but I know in last year's budget, Medicaid was around a $90 billion.
And you've seen that, I'm assuming, go up every year?
Every year.
Yeah.
Every year. Yeah. And, talk about preventative care. One of the responsibilities I had when I was at Community Memorial Hospital Hamilton is I ran the cardiac lab, okay, the stress lab. And it was really interesting to see how many 40-year-olds we were getting on the treadmill that had the heart of a 60-year-old.
Wow.
Diet, stress, no exercise.
Sure. And we see this daily.
We were sending more 40 and 45-year-olds to the cath lab that you could shake a stick at.
So you're seeing the same stuff we're seeing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Younger people.
We did a program in the schools. We got into 75 schools with a curriculum, Fit Kids, Fit Future. So I did assessments on 75 different school students. And I trained PE teachers and health teachers and all of this. So we have data on thousands of kids, and 71% of middle schoolers cannot do a push-up, 81% cannot do a chin-up, and the majority of them can't perform a body weight squat. It's sad. And their core issue, like imbalances, it's through the roof. And so when I made these presentations, we always ask these superintendents, do you think this gets better or worse over time? it gets worse significantly if you don't do anything about it. But this is what we're seeing now. So you said the 40-year-old with the heart of a 60-year-old. We're going even farther back to say elementary, middle school. They're screwed. They're in bad shape unless we turn that curve.
And now, of course, I mean, the trickle-down effect is that a large percentage of people that they're trying to recruit for the military can't even pass the physical exam.
Yeah,
I mean, and this is part of the defense of our country.
Yeah, I saw this. Yeah.
So I, American medicine has been, in a lot of respects, a miracle. What we've done,
big time. Antibiotics. We are keeping people alive longer,
which it's got its inherent problems.
Pros and cons, sure. Yeah. But like, for example, I had Lyme's disease like 10 years ago. I got an antibiotic. I've been perfect since. Like, I would have been dead without that, right?
Yeah.
So like, there are obviously benefits to that, but the cons are there too.
Yeah, I mean, as a respiratory therapist, I saw a lot of people with lung disease, cancer, emphysema, so forth and so on. And, there were certain types of lung cancer that if you got a diagnosis of squamous cell carcinoma, 20 years ago was a pretty bleak picture. Your prognosis was poor. Now, because of research, because of medicine and all that, there's a good chance if you catch it in time, you have a full recovery.
Sure.
And so there's a lot of great things going on in medicine. But of course, this is a whole nother discussion, but what COVID did to medicine, what physicians ended up doing, under pressure from the AMA and the American Association of Pediatrics and some of these other more political organizations. CDC. Was really paint a lot of practitioners into a corner.
Yeah.
All right. And I mean, people work very hard to get their licenses. I mean, I worked hard to get mine. And if that's an issue that, like for instance, when I was at Hamilton Hospital, one of the things, my responsibilities I had was doing fit testing on all the staff. And we would come in and put an N95 on them, and it would be hooked to a particle counter. Very, very sophisticated, very, very sensitive. And then I would make those people go through a series of maneuvers with the mask on, like they would be doing on the floor, bending down, smiling, talking, turning, all those things. And as soon as we got into the maneuvers, we called it, 70% of the people failed.
Oh, because that like basic movement.
That N95 failed. So N95s are state of the art, more or less.
Yeah, sure. It's the higher grade, the higher grade mask. Yeah.
So that when this mask mandate was instituted, I could see through it that, wait a minute, that piece of cloth on your face is not going to do a thing.
Yep.
So I had a Facebook post one day, and I explained what I did, and I said it's anecdotal, but around 70% of the people that I tested failed. And the response was vicious.
Sure.
I actually had a group that were going to petition the Office of Professions and have my license taken away.
Sure.
Because I'm spreading disinformation. So what you did then, in medicine, you took this incredible trust. Sometimes it wasn't appropriate trust, but you took this incredible trust that we had in healthcare, and you just debased all that trust.
Sure. And now it's all coming out.
Now it's all coming
Everything. Out. Where people like yourself and I were saying a lot of this towards the beginning, not just the mask, but other things that we won't get into in this conversation. But now it's fact.
Now it's fact.
We were the weird conspiracy, and it is what it is. And I know that people operate on fear, and they want safety and this and that, right? And I understand that. But I think we have to be much more cautious moving forward with future.
And I don't know if we're going to.
I don't either.
Fear,
I don't think it'll change.
Fear is an incredibly powerful weapon.
Big time.
If you're telling someone you're going to die if you don't keep that mask on.
Stay in your house.
I was one of the few legislators that walked around the Capitol without a mask. I simply wasn't going to wear one. Okay? And I had a young man that passed me in the hallway, and he was double masked. And he looked at me, and he lost it. He's screaming at me. I don't think he realized I was one of the assembly members, okay? And pretty much said, I hope you get pneumonia and die.
Yeah.
So that, or I would get it to go on an elevator, and the door would open, and there would be a whole elevator full of masked people. They wouldn't let me on.
Oh, wow.
They said, we don't want you on this elevator.
Yeah, it definitely separated humanity into two camps. And that's sad because Yeah, I don't know.
And you know, one of the things I've done in the past is I was the vice president of the Madison County Board of Health. So I got to know how public health agencies work in a lot of respects. I don't have an MPH or anything like that, but we were prepared. Okay, we had systems in place for pandemics. And as the pandemic started getting deeper and deeper into the population, all those policies that we had, like making sure you address the needs of your high-risk community, like your senior citizens, all flipped over. It did 180. And all these basic beliefs and theories and policies in controlling and you know, taking care of populations flipped over because people were afraid. They were afraid. You know, if you told someone 5 years ago that you were going to close schools and businesses down,
I would never have believed that.
But they did.
Would happen. Oh, I know.
You know, and again, this all comes back to that awareness. It all comes back to educate.
Yes.
This is one of the things that the congressman I work with believes firmly is educate.
Yes.
Educate and advocate.
That's why I do this podcast. Only for that reason. To educate people.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Two more topics within this category, and then we'll move on to some finishing quicker answers. Trust and war. The majority of people do not trust our government leaders, with only 2 in 10 saying that they have trust in them. What's it going to take to rebuild the American confidence in our leaders?
We have to have honest leaders that are accountable, that are transparent. Okay. They're lied to on a regular basis. And, you know, because they want the vote. And, you know, I'll give you another. I always like to give some kind of example because it reinforces, you know, my position on something. Is when I first got elected, you know, you're always thinking about what you're going to do if you want to become reelected. And it takes money.
Sure.
Obviously, it takes some money. Although I didn't spend much at all. I won't. Okay. But I got a check from a particular special interest. Okay, they gave me a $500 check. Ooh, that's a lot of money. I was like, wow. You know, but I said to them, the gentleman, I said, I'm going to make one thing clear. Okay, this does not mean that I advocate for you. I still advocate for the people that elected me.
Good for you.
And if there's a vote that comes up,
buying you off.
Right. If a vote comes up that is contrary to that, I'm going to vote for what I think and what I've been told is in the best interest.
What did they say?
And he looked and kind of smirked and said, yeah, okay, sure. Okay. Well, 2 votes came up that session, and they were contrary to the interests of that organization. I never saw another penny again. The guy doesn't even talk to me now.
Yeah, sure.
All right, so that money has saturated politics. We need to take that out of the equation.
I agree.
We need now. New York tried this half-hearted program, PACE legislation, that is a benefit. A lot of people don't know this. After this past election, you're now supporting politicians' campaigns. Politicians now can apply for taxpayer-funded subsidies for their campaigns.
Wow.
To the tune of a 6-to-1 match. A 6-to-1 match.
Sure.
People don't know that.
That's insane. That's passed?
It passed. Oh. It starts next election.
Oh, boy.
I raise $1,000. I get $6,000 from the county or from the state. Wow. From the state taxpayers.
Wow.
A 1-to-6 match.
That's unbelievable.
And people don't know this. And I tell them, this is passed. I voted against it, obviously.
Yeah.
But this means that, what it'll do is it'll take the corruption out of the equation. No, it won't. It'll probably make it worse.
Sure. And raise taxes.
And when I questioned how much this whole program was going to cost, I was getting figures from people who admitted they didn't know, but they were giving me figures, $100 million, $200 million. The governor can raise millions of dollars to have it matched by the taxpayers.
That's robbery. Yeah.
And that passed, sailed through the House, both houses, signed by the governor. So you're going to be paying for taxpayers, or you're going to be paying for politicians' campaigns now.
Regardless if you even agree with that specific politician.
Exactly.
Oh, let's talk about the taxpayer money here with war. We're sending billions of dollars to Ukraine. Why are we doing this when our poor and middle class in the United States are struggling so bad? Because
the poor and the middle class in this state are not noticed by the military-industrial complex. And Eisenhower said it back in the 50s. Yeah. There's a very famous video of him saying that the military-industrial complex be very, very weary of them. Okay?
Can you provide, so I'm very familiar with this, we could do a whole separate podcast on this. Can you provide what that is, the military industrial complex? For most people listening, they probably don't know what this is.
The military industrial complex is basically an industry that is paid well to produce guns, produce bombs, produce the mechanisms of war.
So as a result, we are in a forever war.
We're in a forever war because those entities have so much influence. Okay, one of the biggest lobbyists on capital in the capital are the military industrial complexes. Okay, we've gotten small smatterings of how much these things cost. Yep. When you're talking an F-35 costs close to $1 billion. Yep. Okay, an Abrams tank, I don't know, I don't even remember exactly, hundreds of millions of dollars. When you have that kind of money that's being paid out, it almost invites corruption.
In the economic circulation, right? We want that wheel to keep spinning.
Yeah, and there are people that have jobs.
It's a business.
Yeah, a lot of people have jobs in the military industrial complex, and they produce a fine product. Yep. Although some people would have an issue with a product that kills people, being fine, but it's become such an integral part of our economy now.
Yep.
And they control that so effectively. We're sending it. Look, my grandfather was from Ukraine. Okay, I have Ukrainian blood in me, and what's going on over there is a tragedy.
Yes,
it's a tragedy. It should never happen, and I blame that squarely on Joe Biden.
Yep.
Okay, he's got blood on his hands.
Yep.
Big time. All right, but nonetheless, they have the right to defend themselves. All right, if you get into the weeds on it, you start to see exactly why Russia did what they did. But that, like you said, that could be about a whole nother podcast. But the military-industrial complex is looking at this as a huge moneymaker. Just the way the pharmaceutical companies are looking at COVID is a huge moneymaker.
Yep.
Okay, and that is a process that is going to be very, very difficult.
Well, we've had it for 100+ years.
Yeah,
we've been constant war.
Exactly. We've been in war for and the problem is that the big issue I have, and Rand Paul brought this up. Anybody keeping track of this stuff?
Yeah.
From what I understand, they're literally sending pallets of cash over to Ukraine.
Yes.
Nobody knows where this equipment's going. There's at least some belief that this equipment is actually being sold on the black market.
Yes.
So
I've heard that we're also funding Russia. Again, who I don't have backing behind that, right? But we're sending money to both sides.
Isn't it kind of sad that it is believable?
Yeah.
That
for sure.
Even if it's not, if people are actually believing that this can happen, tells you that we have a very deep inherent problem with. And can you blame why people don't trust government anymore?
No, it's our taxpayer money. It's funding the military-industrial complex.
Exactly. They've been lied to over and over.
I saw a meme last week. It had President Zelensky, in a Lamborghini with his thumb up reminding U.S. taxpayers to pay their taxes.
Yeah.
That pretty much sums it up. It's some degree, right? It's comical, satire, or whatever, right?
Well, but it can happen.
It's not far from the truth.
It has happened.
Yes.
Time and time again, it has happened.
Yes.
And unfortunately, like people like Tucker Carlson, everybody knows what what happened to him. And again, it all comes down to whether or not people want to take the time for their own quality of life and for the quality of life of their families to pay attention and to say enough is enough.
That's a great
And the
thing.
vote does count.
It does. So finish up. We have some listener questions that came in. I want to go through these. So what do you feel has been your biggest impact in your government career, your government role, your biggest impact?
I think the biggest impact is I have pleasantly been able to hear from people that they were glad that I was informing them to what's going on. And usually they're two statements. Okay. One's a little frustrating. The other is I'm proud of is I'm glad you told me that. I didn't realize that. And the other is, well, we can't do anything about it. Okay. Or nah, they wouldn't do that. Well, they do, and they are, and they will. Okay. But I think one of my, like for instance, in the town of Brookfield, it's a big town. And when I first took office, we held our town board meetings down in Brookfield. But I thought, well, geez, North Brookfield's all the way over here, and Leonardsville all the way over here. So what we started doing is we started holding our town board meetings, rotating them.
Yeah.
We do one in Brookfield, one in North Brookfield, another in Leonardsville, then we go back to Brookfield. So we started circulating the town board meetings throughout the town. All right, simple to do. Reserve the local fire department. We had great turnout.
Yeah.
Sometimes the turnout was a little hostile, you know, but we had great turnout.
Sure.
So government went to them
Yep.
instead of them being expected to come to government. And I was very proud of that. I was very proud of that.
That's great. How can we stay up to date on bills waiting to be passed and or supported to be passed before it's too late to contact our reps?
Contact your rep now, okay? If there's something, because, for instance, in the assembly, we would have on the average of 1,000 bills that we would vote on.
Wow.
Okay? And again, some of those bills you had very little knowledge of, especially the budget.
Okay.
Very little knowledge. So what I did is I always voted against them. If I didn't know about that bill
Sure.
or was acquainted with it,
Sure.
I had to vote against it.
Yep.
Okay? And it's bit me a couple times, I have to admit, but I just didn't simply have time.
Sure.
All right? But even with a good staff, it's almost impossible. The newspaper, you're not going to get much correct information.
No.
You know,
Sure.
and I don't care what you're looking at. All right? It's up to you. All right, to be able to find out, and we'll help. And on the federal level, we could even help on the state level. People are willing. You know, they're welcome to contact our office, okay, or me, and I'll leave my email. All right, so that people can contact me. But you know, they need to become aware. All right, because a lot of times what happens is a bill will be passed and signed into law, and you didn't even know it existed. So it takes that amount of work to keep up on it. When I was in the assembly, and even now, we have regular people that reach out to us and ask questions.
So that's what you're recommending people do.
Reach out.
If they've
They
heard of
work
a
for
bill,
you.
they've heard of a bill, they want to follow it, to reach out to the local rep to see where it stands.
And we can kind of help them navigate through, because I'll tell you what, it's not an easy process.
Well, this is why this question came in.
Yeah.
Because there are people at our facility that are frustrated, as they should be, with something they heard about maybe in the beginning stages, and then it disappears, and then it's passed.
Well,
or not
exactly.
passed.
Exactly. It'll be an idea. Basically, the whole process is you have an idea or a proposal. It goes to committee. It might go to 3 or 4 committees. Then it goes to the floor. It's debated. Sometimes it's decided before it even goes to the committee.
Sure.
Honestly,
Sure.
You know, but you know, people are welcome to contact me on my Facebook page. You know, John Salka, Salka. I'll be glad to field any questions. I kind of I like doing it.
Excellent.
Yeah. And if I don't know right away, I'll do the research. And again, this is what we get paid to do.
Yeah, and you have been, especially with me, phenomenal getting back in conversation.
Thank you.
Yes. Do you have an update on the SAFE Act? It's been deemed unconstitutional at the federal level, but New York is stepping in and trying to fight some of this. So do you have any updates?
Yeah, it's getting worse.
Okay, explain that.
They passed a bill last year, all right, and a lot of people know about it, hopefully. They make restrictions on where you can carry, even owners. You can't carry, it seems to be, anywhere else but your own home.
I know.
Okay, they also passed a law that you have to be 21 years old to buy a semi-automatic weapon. I was there on the floor of the assembly while we were debating that. And small example, I asked the prime sponsor, why did you come up with this 21-year limit? I remember from when I studied biology at Utica College, the human brain isn't fully developed till you're 25.
I thought the same thing.
I said, so where's your justification? And
Yep.
she said, now granted, this is someone from Brooklyn, okay? And the only concept she has of guns are, people getting killed in the hood, all right? So, and I saw, in a way, I can't blame her. But she said, well, we would have raised it to 25 if we knew we could get away with it.
Yeah.
So what you do now have is the most gun-unfriendly environment in the country.
Yep.
And that's motivating a lot of people to say, no, I'm moving out.
But yeah, I've heard from many people.
And right now, we have a corrupt attorney general.
Yep.
All right. We have a corrupt governor,
Yep.
all right, to say the least. But we have those people in place right now in New York State that my optimism for changing these gun laws is not high.
No.
And the judiciary, all right, this is all controlled. So if you have a perfectly constitutional case that goes before a democratically appointed judge, odds are you're not going to get anywhere.
Man, so the Second Amendment is getting drowned out here.
Where they're beating the hell out of it.
And they're making even like ammo sales
Right.
harder. Like you want 1,000 rounds, you go take a course or do some good shooting, right? Like safely and right. you can't get that mailed to your house anymore.
No, you can't.
You know, and even so, I have a pistol permit. You know, I can't carry it now in the majority of places.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah.
I can't carry mine.
Exactly. Versus before, it was like we went through that whole process, safety, applications, fingerprints, courses. I've taken additional courses.
Sure.
And so here I am, a law-abiding, skillful handler of a firearm, and I can't even use that hardly anymore.
No, it's insanity.
Yeah.
You know, and I questioned, her name is Crystal People-Stokes. She's the majority leader for the New York State Assembly. And I asked her point blank while we were debating this gun law, one of them, that in fact, it was to do with high capacity magazines.
Yep.
And I said to her, Madam, what if, I mean, essentially, you're going to take these things away from people, right? Mm-hmm. And she said, yeah, we are. And I said, in my book, it's called confiscation. Mm-hmm. Now, the confiscation was a word that they used to hide from. And she said point blank, yes, we'll confiscate them.
Yeah, unbelievable.
So now they're very unapologetic.
Sure, they're getting very
because
aggressive.
they're getting away with it.
Yeah, the NRA is struggling too with funding.
Oh yeah,
you know, I've heard this. They're getting, they're having a hard go at it, and that's our number one push.
It's our number one advocate.
That's our number one advocate.
And our Attorney General and our past disgraced governor has vowed to run the NRA out of business.
I know, I saw that.
You know, and it's sad. I don't see much loosening up with it.
No.
I just feel bad for the poor person who's in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they're going to make an example. It's already happened. You know, with the SAFE Act, they make examples out of these people.
Well, the gun laws get stricter, but violence goes up.
So
again, I'm a math guy,
yeah,
right?
Isn't there a correlation here?
Correct.
And there's actually a causation.
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, but they don't care.
Yeah.
The New York State Legislature thumbs their nose at not only the U.S. Constitution, but the Constitution of the state of New York.
Yeah.
Okay, because I've been there in the debates. We have a brilliant guy that works in the Republican minority. His name is Andy Goodell. He's an assembly member from out in the western part of the state. Brilliant lawyer. It's fascinating to watch him debate because he bases a lot of his arguments on the Constitution.
Sure.
And states in statute where you're violating the Constitution. And you know what their stand is? Sue us. Pass the bill and then sue us.
Good luck. Yeah.
And at that point, it's a bill. It's a law.
Thomas Massey from Kentucky.
Right.
He does a lot of the same thing. And he's like, he has like 25 patents from MIT. He's a genius.
Sure.
And he's a, constitutional expert. And the same response. It is unconstitutional.
They don't mind.
But it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's a problem. Well, John, this has been great. I have one last question. What advice do you have for an 18-year-old that wants to live a productive, happy life?
Live a productive and happy life. I learned through the years, I grew up in a single-parent home. I watched my mother work 2 jobs just to put bread on the table. And she taught me that obviously you work for what you earn, what you get. And to make sure that all the problems that we've talked about with this country, it's still the greatest country in the world. It's still worth working for. It's still worth fighting for. And to stay focused on your goals. When I ran for the assembly, I had to run 3 times because my attitude is persistence is the key to success. If you get knocked down, you get up, you roll your sleeves up, and you fight twice as hard. Okay, and with the realization that if we don't, all right, we have nowhere else to go. Especially a young person. This is your future. We've kind of screwed it up for you. Okay, this is your future. Become aware of what's going on around you. Try to make changes where you can, but always stay focused that the freedom of the world depends on you. The freedom of the world. And not to be too melodramatic, but this world's in their hands now.
Correct.
Okay, like I said, we've done a pretty good job of screwing it up.
Yep.
But if our young people don't become aware, don't realize, again, when I was young, I did a lot of knuckleheaded things too. No doubt about it. That's being young is all about. Okay, and as people get older, they have children, they get more conservative because they realize what's at threat. So it's almost a matter of, as you get older, you realize this. But I always have said, stay focused on your goals, be persistent, make sure that you are truthful, make sure that you deal with people with the same respect you would expect, and you go about your life doing the best you can with what you got.
Mm-hmm. That's great advice. John, thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you.
This has been awesome.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
How can listeners learn more about the work that you're doing or reach out with a question? How can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. So we have close, I think we're almost at the limit, though, on the personal site, 5,000. But I have a email address here at my office, my congressional office. It's john.salka@at mail.house.gov.
Okay. And I'll put it in the link.
Put it in the link.
Yep.
And, they're welcome to contact me. Also, my personal email, and I have no problem giving that out, is jsalka, 3, @gmail.com.
Awesome.
Okay. And, I'm willing to help any way I can. Mm-hmm. When you look at life as a series of mistakes and successes, you learn from the mistakes, okay, and you celebrate the successes, okay? And it's always, even at 68 years old, I come in every day and learn something new. And that's what makes life fun.
Yes.
That's what makes life fun. And we need to fight. We need to fight harder than ever.
That is a great ending. Thank you, John.
Thank you.